Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and today we got ourselves 12 hero specs to take a look at. The War Within updates are getting more regular and regular, which tells me that the War Within Alpha might actually be fast approaching. So far, we've got to witness a ton of new hero talent concepts over the last few weeks and months, with only a handful of them still missing from the spotlight, but we'll likely keep seeing regular updates next week or even the week after that. So in today's video, I want to take a closer look and give you guys my early impressions of the hero specs we have so far, which are going to contain two new options for Death Knights as well as Monks, as well as a new hero spec for Shamans, Demon Hunters, Druids, and more. It's going to be a pretty long update, so I kind of want to get into that as early as possible. But right before we get into it, most of you guys watching these kind of update videos are still not subscribed. However, the more of you remind, the more of you do. So let's keep it going. Subscribe to the channel and ring the bell if you're watching these videos anyway. Especially if you want to get more regular content regarding Dragonflight 10.2.5 or any future updates for patches like 10.2.6 or the War Within Alpha. The first hero talent we have a look at today is the one for Rider of the Apocalypse, which is shared between the Unholy and the Frost Death Knight. Rider's champion is your primary ability. Spender Runes has a chance to call forth one of the horsemen for 10 seconds, either Morgreen, Whitemane, Trollbane, or Nazgrim, very similar to the horseman you could summon in Torghast if you ever played that during Shadowlands with one of those anima powers. With Morgreen, he casts Death and Decay on his location, and it follows his position, and I assume that all of the abilities that function with Death and Decay would also benefit the affected Death Knight. With Whitemane, you cast Undeath on your primary target, dealing Shadow Frost damage per stack every 3 seconds for 24 seconds. Each time Undeath deals damage, it gains a stack but cannot be refreshed. With Trollbane, he casts Chains of Ice, slowing your target down, but also increasing their damage taken by 5%. With Nazgrim active, you gain Apocalyptic Conquest, increasing your strength by 5%. And the whole talent tree is going to revolve around either buffing the effectiveness of these riders or buffing the Death Knight directly. There is also a blue post right in the talents with the developers note saying that the Riders of the Apocalypse and some of the Sunlayan talent trees have too many talents and abilities that function off of Death and Decay. And Death Knight in general, like Blood in particular, gains so many different benefits, especially when it comes to in-combat benefits, while standing in Death and Decay. And they're going to try to see if they can decouple these things over time. Things like Cleaving Strikes is going to be adjusted how it's going to function in War Within, and they're going to try to remove things outside of Death and Decay and I guess give it to the Death Knight more passively. But this is good to see, good to hear that they're listening to the Death Knight feedback. On the right hand side, we got choice talents like Horseman's Aids or Pact of the Apocalypse. While at your aid, the Horseman will occasionally cast Anti-Magic Shell on you and themselves, and 80% effectiveness could be actually very strong against magic damage. Or Pact of the Apocalypse, when you take damage, 5% of the damage is redirected to each alive horseman, which is cool because you'll be able to summon all of them at once later down the line. On the Pale Horse is the talent on the left hand side versus Death Charge. On the Pale Horse, while outdoors, you're able to mount your Archer's Charger in combat, so it really gives you the ability to ride on your mount while in combat. That's actually really cool. On the Pale Horse, I do wonder how many aspects are treated as outdoors, like do certain battlegrounds get treated as outdoor content, or even certain dungeons, because this could drastically increase Death Knight's mobility in general. Death Charge replaces Death's Advance. Call upon Death Charges to break free of movement apparent effects. For 10 seconds while upon your Death Charges, so you actually mount your horse. Your movement speed is increased by 100%, you cannot be slowed. Basically the Paladin horse mobility overall. In the bottom middle, we have another choice node with Fury of the Horseman or Feast of Souls. Every 50 runes you spend extends the duration of your Horseman's Aid in combat by an additional second by up to 5 seconds, or a Feast of Souls. While you have 2 or more horsemen aiding you, your runic power spending abilities deal 20% increased damage and have 10% chance to refund a rune. So other ways to modify your valuable horseman. Morgreen's Might increases your damage by 5%, and you gain the benefits of Death and Decay while inside Morgreen's Death and Decay, so that's kind of cool to see. Nazgrim's Conquest. If an enemy dies while Nazgrim is active, the strength of the Apocalyptic Conquest is increased by 3%. Additionally, each rune you spend increases the value by 1%. Could be kind of good in certain ad-heavy situations. Trollbane's Icy Fury. When you obliterate or Scourge Strike a target affected by Troll's main chain of ice, it shatters the only Shadow Frost damage to nearby enemies and slows them by 40%. I like the interactivity. Mossworn Menace. The cooldown of the Horn of Winter and Unholy Blight is reduced by 15 seconds. I think this is going to be the first time we'll actually see our Horn of Winter get more regular play for Frost Death Knights. Damage to disease is Frost Strike, Death Call increased by 50%. A White Man's Famine. When your disease deals damage to an enemy affected by undeath, it gains another stack. Additionally, when undeath deals damage, it affects another nearby enemy, also even more interactivity between all of the riders. Apocalypse Now is your primary ability. Army of the Dead and Frostworm's Fury call upon all 4 horsemen to aid you for 20 seconds, which is going to be how you're going to get the most amount of damage out of your Death Knight, with all 4 horsemen active, protecting you, buffing you, and giving you a lot of interactivity. It doesn't really feel like a hero talent that's going above the Death Knight specifically, but that interactivity with the Riders of the Apocalypse and how they enhance your ability, I think it's going to be kind of cool. Although it does make the Death Knight more of a pet class, because a lot of your damage and value is going to rely off of the pets or the riders that you get to summon, but I think it's still a nice flavorful option. This week we also get access to another hero spec of the class of Death Knight, one that's available for both Frost as well as a Blood Death Knight, which gains the ability of Reaper's Mark. Deathbringer's ability is going to be a 2 rune cost with a 1 minute cooldown, where you viciously slice into the soul of your enemy, dealing Shadow Frost damage and applying Reaper's Mark. Each time you deal Shadow or Frost damage, you add a stack of Reaper's Mark, and after 12 seconds or upon reaching 40 stacks of Reaper's Mark, the mark explodes, dealing damage per stack. Reaper's Mark travels to an unmarked enemy if the target dies, or explodes below 35% health when there are no enemies to travel to. This explosion cannot occur again on the target for 3 minutes. So this is an active ability you'll try to apply, build it up and explode, which is going to be potentially interesting, but I want to see how it gets modified by other talents. Wave of Souls. Reaper's Mark unleashes a dark wave towards the target and back, dealing Shadow Frost damage both ways to all enemies caught on its path. Wave of Souls critical strikes cause enemies to take 5% increased Shadow Frost damage for 15 seconds, stack it up to 2 times, and the wave back is always a critical strike, so at least you get some value out of Wave of Souls even if you don't crit on the initial wave. Blood and Fever. Blood Plague has a chance to deal 30% increased damage as Shadow Frost, or for Frost Fever you have a 30% chance to deal 30% increased damage to Shadow Frost, which also applies towards the Reaper's Mark. Being Shadow Frost, I imagine gains 2 stacks as well. Bind in Darkness. Shadow Frost damage applies double stacks to Reaper's Mark and quadruple stacks when it's a critical strike. Blood Boil will now deal Shadow Frost damage, and Rime Empowered Howling Blast also deals Shadow Frost damage. On the right hand side, we have a choice node with Death's Bargain. When you suffer a damage and effect equal to 25% of your maximum health, you instantly cast Death Pact. At 50% effectiveness, may only occur once every 2 minutes. Death Pact gives you a heal absorb effect though. I like that emergency healing, but I don't really know if I like the absorb heal that comes with Death Pact ability. If they maybe remove or reduce heavily the absorb effect, that could be good, but I'm not quite sure. When a Reaper's Mark explodes, the cooldown of this effect and Death Pact are reduced by 5 seconds. Or a rune carved plates. Each rune spent reduces the match damage you take by 2%, and each rune generated reduces the physical damage you take. I kind of like this rune generated, rune spent ability within 5 seconds. I think that one could actually be kind of low-key good. Down in the middle, we have ourselves Grim Reaper. Reaper's Mark Explosion deals 30% increased damage based on your target's missing health and applies Soul Reaper to targets below 35% health, so a lot of execute value with this ability. On the left hand side we have ourselves Shuddering Soul. Reaper's Mark Explosion causes a piece of the target's soul to tear out and spiral outwards, dealing 10% of the explosion's damage to enemies it passes through. Each enemy hit by this effect deals 5% reduced physical damage to you for 10 seconds. On the left hand side we got another choice node, Swift End. Reaper's Mark cost is reduced by 1 rune and its cooldown is reduced by 50%, so it makes it a little bit more active. Or Painful Death. Reaper's Mark now explodes at 50% stacks, or 50 stacks rather than 40, and the first Scythe of Exterminate has a 100% chance to apply Reaper's Mark. Scythes are going to be something we'll take a look at here in a second. On the right hand side we have Death's Messenger. Reduces the cooldown of Lichborn and Raise Dead by 30 seconds. Which could be kind of good and could make sacrificing your ghoul a regular defensive ability technically for Death Knights. Or Expelling. When an enemy deals direct damage to your anti-magic shell, their cast speed is reduced by 10% for 6 seconds. Also could be kind of good on some PvE situations. Down the middle we have ourselves Dark Talents. While Icy Talents is active, so it makes you want to play into the Icy Talents talent, your Rune Power spending abilities deal Shadow Frost damage. Really? This basically makes all abilities deal Shadow Frost in a way. Mara and Hot Strike have a 20% chance to increase the maximum stacks of an active Icy Talons by 1 up to 2 times. For Frost, Killing Machine, Consuming Killing Machine or Rhyme has a 20% chance to increase the maximum stacks of an active Icy Talons by 1 up to 2 times. Or a choice note between Wither Away. Blood Plague deals its damage in half the duration, and the second Scythe of Exterminator applies a Blood Plague. Again, we'll talk about Scythe in a second. For Frost, Frost Reaver deals its damage in half the duration, and the second Scythe of Exterminator applies a Frost Fever. Interesting. Exterminate is the primary ability or the capstone ability of this hero spec. After Reaper's Mark explodes, your next Marrowrend or Obliterate costs no runes and summon 2 Scythes, which is how some of these talents interact with these Scythe-specific abilities. So those abilities, Obliterate and Marrowrend, will summon 2 Scythes to strike at your targets. The first Scythe strikes your target for physical damage, has a 50% chance to apply Reaper's Mark. The second Scythe strikes all enemies around your target for Shadow Frost damage. I kind of like this Shadow Frost incorporation and Shadow Frost damage of the Deathbringer playstyle. It kind of uses the Arthas archetype of this frosty Death Knight, but it's also one that's very, very tanky at the same time. And this Shadow Frost put together, I think it's actually quite good. The next hero talent we have is for the Aldrachi Reaver. I'm pretty sure I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. Aldrachi. I'm gonna go with Aldrachi just for the sake of it. For Havoc and Vengeance, Demon Hunters don't really have too many options between some of the hero talents, as both the Vengeance and Havoc will share too. The ability for the Reaver is going to be the Art of the Glaive. Consuming 3 Havocs or 20 Vengeance Soul Fragments allows you to cast Reaver's Glaive. It replaces Throw Glaive. Throw Glaive enhanced with the essence of Consumed Souls at your target, dealing physical damage and ricocheting to 2 additional targets for additional damage. Begins a well-practiced pattern of glaive work, enhancing your next Chaos Strike and Blade Dance, Fracture, Shear, or Soul Cleave. Chaos Strike, Shear, or Fracture applies Reaver's Mark on the target, causing them to take 50% increased damage for 5 seconds. Blade Dance and Soul Cleave deal 3 additional glaive slashes to nearby enemies for additional damage, so it's a bit of like a combo playstyle that works with a Throw Glaive that enhances your next few basic abilities for 15 seconds. Got it. We got choice nodes like Keen Engagement. Reaver's Glaive generates 20 Fury, or Throw Glaive deals damage to enemies near its initial target, which could be good for AoE. In the middle, we have Evasive Action or Unhindered Assault. Vengeful Retreat can be cast a second time within 3 seconds. That could be really good for PvP in particular. Or Vengeful Retreat reset the cooldowns of Fellblade, which also could be really good for mobility. Army Unto Thyself. Fellblade surrounds you with a Blade Ward, reducing physical damage taken by 10% for 15 seconds. Could actually be kind of strong. Or Uncorruptible Spirit, consuming a Soul Fragment, also heals you for additional 50% over time. I actually kind of like the healing over time effect also. Not too many choice nodes for Death Knights in particular. On the right, we have here the Incisive Blade. When enhanced, Chaos Strike and Soul Cleave deal 30% increased damage. Wounded Quarry, while Reaver's Mark is active when your target melee attacks have a chance to strike an additional Glaive Slash for damage and Shatter a Soul. Warblade's Hunger, consuming Soul Fragments causes your next Chaos Strike, Shear, or Fracture to deal bonus damage. Escalation, each successful enhanced ability deals 10% increased damage. The effect of the second enhancement is increased by 100%. Intent Pursuit, casting an enhanced ability reduces the remaining cooldown of your hunt, so another talent that we see that plays with hunt, similar to how the Havoc Demon Hunters tier set currently works. And Aldrachi Tactics, one or the other, the second enhanced ability in a pattern shatters an additional soul fragment. So there's quite a bit of interactivity between souls as well as damage and abilities, but very much straightforward compared to some of the other hero talents. Thrill of the Fight is the capstone ability. After consuming both enhancements, gain Thrill of the Fight, increasing your attack speed by 50% for 5 seconds, causing next ability to deal 30% increased damage and healing. Again, very passive, very straightforward playstyle that plays off of the combo build of you using abilities and then gaining an enhanced Throw Glaive that enhances your abilities further, which I think a simple playstyle will probably create a pretty decent flow for Demon Hunters. Up next, we have Druid of the Claw, shared between Feral and Guardian Druids with a massive ability called Massive Attack. Your auto attacks have a chance to make your next Ferocious Bite or Maul become Massive Attack. Massive Attack, a finisher move that slashes through your target in a wide arc, dealing physical damage per common point to your target and consuming up to 25 additional energy to increase that damage by 100%. It's all other enemies in front of you for reduced damage per common point, so basically like a cleave bite. I'm not a big fan of it proccing off of your auto attacks. I know the Guardian got abilities that proc off of autos, and Feral technically sort of do as well with clear casting, but there were too much interaction with auto attacks and Druids in particular. We saw that in Abras for Feral, their tier set, and I always found it weird, but I guess it'll still function, or should function pretty well. And each one of these actually has like Feral and Guardian combinations, so there's a lot of different aspects for us to take a look at, depending on the spec you're going to be playing. Left hand side, we got Font of Strength. Maximum energy and rage increased by 20. That could be really good for Ferals. And Frenzied Regeneration also increases your maximum health by 10%. Also could be really good for overall survivability. Wild Shape Mastery. Iron Fur and Frenzied Regen persist in cat form. Really? That's interesting. When transforming from bear to cat, you retain 80% of your bear form armor and health for 6 seconds. That bear weaving? Is that what you're going to see out of bear dudes? Bear cat weaving? And for 6 seconds after entering bear form, you heal for 10% damage taken over 8 seconds. That could be really good defensively for Feral and Bear. That could be very interesting. Empowered Shapeshifting. Frenzied Regen can be cast in cat form at 40 energy, for 40 energy. That's actually also really strong defensively. Bear form reduces magic damage you take by 4%. Also very, very strong, because bears normally have a pretty hard time with magic damage specifically. Shred Swipe, Mangle damage increased by 5. That's also interesting. Or a choice now between Wild Power Surge. Feral, Shred, and Swipe grant Ursine potential. When you have 8 stacks, next time you transform into bear form, your next Mangle or Swipe deals 100% increased damage. So they really do want you to play into like, hey, you're a Feral, there's just a reason to go into bear form, use an ability, then go back into Feral form. And for Guardian, it's going to be Mangle grants Feline potential. When you have 6 stacks, the next time you transform into cat, you gain 5 combo points. Your next bite or rip deals 50% increased damage. I kind of like that Feral and Guardian like form switching between the two. I actually really like that concept in general. Dreadful Wound. Massive attack that inflicts a bleed that causes additional damage over time, over 6 seconds, and saps its victim's strength, reducing damage they deal to you by 5%. That's really strong for Bear. Dreadful Wound is not affected by Circle, Life, and Death. Claw Rampage is your capstone ability. During Berserk, Shred, Swipe, and Thrash, you have a 25% chance to make your next ferocious bite become a massive attack. So during Berserk, you're more likely to get these procs. And the same thing for Guardian. During Berserk, your basic abilities have a 25% chance to make your next maul become a massive attack. Overall, I like this interactivity between Bear and Feral. I wasn't impressed with the massive attack initially and the auto attack proc rate, but some of the other talents combined together do make it interesting. Very excited for this bear weaving, cat weaving thing they got going on towards the bottom left and left side of the talent tree. Very excited to see how that works out. Normally you don't really, as a druid, you don't enjoy having to shift out of your form to do other things. Like I see a restoration druid who wants to do more damage. As a Feral, you didn't really enjoy shifting to Boomkin for owl weaving back in Shadowlands, or at least not a lot of people did. And I imagine for Boomkin that would also feel awkward having to shift into cat form to execute a portion of your rotation. But that being said, I actually like the way that they're trying to encourage you to want to use the other side of the Guardian Feral combo, while allowing to retain a lot of the defensive value, or even gain new defensive value, or even survivability value just for shifting into bear form, and how it rewards you. And I think this could be a very interesting hero spec to play with. Alright, the next one is going to be Flameshaper, which is shared between Preservation and Devastation Evokers. They get the ability of Engulf as the primary active ability with a 20-second cooldown. Engulf your target in Dragon Flame, damaging and healing them. For each of your periodic effects on target, the effectiveness is increased by 50%. So it's 20-second cooldown ability, so as long as you get dots in them, you can do more damage or more healing. 50% increased effectiveness is actually kind of strong. We don't really know what the numbers are going to be like for this one. I imagine it's pretty low unless you have dots and hots on them. But this could scale pretty well. This could scale out of control pretty heavily, especially for Preservation Healer. Left hand side, we got a choice now with Trailblazer or Shape of Flame. Trailblazer, hover in deep breath, travel 50% faster, and hover travels 50% further. This could be really good for that deep breath, so you can finish out that ability as quickly as possible. While Shape of Flame, Tail Swipe and Wing Buffet scorch your enemies and blind them with Ash, causing the next attack to miss for 4 seconds. That could be really good in Mythic Plus situations, but also in PvP. Conduit of Flame. Critical strike chance against foes above 50% health is increased by 10. This could be really good for a healer. This is value as long as you top in somebody that's kind of above 50% health, so spot healing them maybe. But oh man, this is good. I don't know, you lose that crit when they're lower in health. I would love to see at least like 5% crit when they're below a certain amount or something like that. Titanic Precision. Living Flame, Reversion, and Azure Strike. Critical strikes have a 100% chance to trigger Essence Burst, so I guess it's going to be a very crit heavy playstyle. Traveling Flame. Engulf causes Fire Breath or Dream Breath, preservation only, to spread to nearby targets. If no valid targets are present, its duration is refreshed. I like that spread. I think that could be really good. Burning Adrenaline. Engulf quickens your pulse, reducing the cast time of your next spell by 30%. Stacks up to 2 charges. This could be actually really good, especially since it can spread to multiple targets. Engulf gains 1 additional charge, so that's how you can get a second stack very quickly, and deals 20% increased damage or healing. Also, very simple ability, very simple interaction. Enkindle. Essence abilities are enhanced with Flame, dealing 20% of healing or damage done as fire over 8 seconds, just 20% more damage for all of your Essence abilities. Very strong. Fan the Flames. Engulf reignites Enkindle, extending its duration and effects by 25%. Or Expanded Lungs. Fire Breath damage over time is increased by 20%, and for preservation only, Dream Breath heal over time is increased by 20%. Or you have Life Cinders. Renewal Blaze also applies to one nearby ally when cast, so this is your self-heal that you can actually apply to another ally. That's actually kind of cool. Or Draconic Instincts. Your wounds have a small chance to cauterize, healing you for 30% of the damage taken. Occurs more often from attacks that deal high damage. That could also be passively good if the heal is decent. Your penultimate ability is Consume Flame. For Devastation, Engulf consumes 8 seconds of Fire Breath from the target, detonating it and damaging all nearby targets equal to 300% of the amount consumed, reduced beyond 5 targets. For Preservation, it uses your Dream Breath from the target, detonating it, healing allies for consumed. Also, a very simple interaction for this version of the Evoker compared to what we've seen with Scale Commander as well as the Chrono Warden. Flameshaper seems to be a very solid one that has a decent foundation and some of the built on abilities and passives that will work with Preservation and Devastation, but also very passive in a way. It adds you an extra ability. There's some new interactions with that ability, but for the most part it seems more passive than what we've seen so far from some of the hero specs. Next up we have Beast Mastery and Survival Hunters, which share the pack leader hero spec. Your first ability is going to be Vicious Hunt. Kill Command prepares you to viciously attack in coordination with your pet, dealing additional physical damage with your next kill command. That could be also really good depending on interactions that you could have with this one. Covering Fire. Beast Mastery. Kill command increases the duration of Beast Cleave by 1 second, or Survival Wildfire Bomb reduces the cooldown of Carve Mature by 2 seconds, so a bit of a interaction between the two. Scatter Prey. Beast Mastery Multi-Shot increases the damage of your next multi-shot by 25%. Does it keep stacking, or is it just encourages you to press multi-shot more often? For Survival Cover and Butcher, increase the damage of next Cover and Butcher by 25%. That 25% damage increase could be pretty strong on its own, honestly. In the middle, we have Howl of the Pack. Your pet's basic damage, critical strikes, increase your crit damage by 5%, stack it up to 3 times, so some crit interactions to it. A choice now between Tireless Hunt, where Aspect of the Cheetah now increases movement speed by 50% for another 8 seconds, could be great as well, or Cornered Prey. Disengage increases the range of all of your attacks by 5 yards. That could also be really good for survival. Call the Herd. Kill Shot deals additional 30% damage over 5 seconds and increases the bleed damage of you and your pet deal by 25%, so encourages a bleed heavy playstyle. Wild Attacks. Every third basic pet attack is guaranteed critical strike, so it kind of combines together with Howl of the Pack, which damage further is increased by critical strike chance. Frenzied Terror. Your pet's basic attack has a 20% chance to reset the cooldown of Kill Command, cause Kill Command to strike a second time for 30% normal damage. Furious Assault. Beast Mastery Consume Frenzied Tear has a 50% chance to reset the cooldown of Barb Shot and deal 30% additional damage, or for survival is going to be your next Raptor Strike, or Morgus Bite Be Free and deal 30% additional damage. Or Beast of Opportunity. Bestial Wrath calls on the pack, summoning a pet from the stable for 6 seconds, or Coordinate Assault calls a beast from the pack, summoning a pet from stable for 6 seconds, which also could be kind of really good for survival, because there's quite a bit of kill command and pet auto attack interactivity during Coordinator Assault. Your final ability is going to be Pack Assault. Vicious Hunt and Pack Coordination now stack and apply twice and are always active during Call of the Wild or Coordinated Assault. So also very passive interactivity with your pet as well as pet basic attacks, but I think this one could be interesting enough where inside of your major cooldowns and in between your pet kill command abilities, this could be kind of an interesting combo that adds a little bit additional gameplay, but even though it's not the most active version of the Hunter hero specs we've seen so far, this one does seem like it could be passive, but quite strong in terms of some of its interactions and abilities that I think synergize well with both Beast Mastery and Survival. Up next, we have the Spellslinger, which is a hero spec available for Frost and Arcane Mage. There is a developer note: Spellslingers are themed and tuned based on your active spec. Arcane Splinters are named Arcane Splinters and deal moderate arcane damage. Okay, so we'll take a look at that later. So Spellslinger is going to be the hero spec for Arcane and Frost Mages with the primary ability of Splintering Sorcery. Arcane, when you consume Nether Precision, consume a splinter that fires at your target. When you consume Winter's Chill, conjure a splinter that fires at your target. So I guess those splinters are going to be, as I said here, Arcane or Frost damage. Controlled Instincts. For Arcane, while the target is under the effects of Nether Tempest, 20% of the direct damage dealt by Splinter is also dealt to nearby enemies, so it gives you a bit of a cleave capability. Direct damage from Arcane Splinters resets the duration of Nether Tempest. Could be good. Frost. Wait, does this mean like... From Splinters, could this mean that you have basically just like a perma loop of Nether Tempest Arcane Splinters permanently on the target, or am I misreading it? I'm probably misreading it. For Frost, while the target is under the effects of Winter's Chill, 20% of the direct damage dealt by Splinters is also dealt to nearby enemies. Damage is reduced beyond 5 targets. Down below we have Reactive Barrier, where Prismatic Barrier or Ice Barrier can absorb up to 50% more damage based on your missing health. Effectiveness max effectiveness under 50% health, so you get better shield the lower health you are. Or Phantasmal Image. Your image summons an extra clone. Mirror Image now reduces all damage taken by additional 5%, so more passive survivability or a better cooldown. Spell Frost Teachings. Direct damage from Splinters has a 5% chance to summon an Arcane Echo or an Icy Comet that deals damage to all nearby enemies and increases the damage those enemies take from you by 6% for 6 seconds, so more passive damage increases. Augury Abounds. Casting Arcane Surge conjures 8 Splinters. During Arcane Surge, whenever you conjure a Splinter, you have a 100% chance to conjure an additional Splinter. Or for Frost, during Icy Winds you conjure 8 Splinters, and whenever you conjure a Splinter, you have a 100% chance to generate an additional Splinter, so you generate more Splinters inside of your cooldowns. Slippery Slinging. You have a 40% increased movement speed after or during altar time, so it gives you a bit more survivability, or at least mobility, that can result in better survivability. Look again, Displacement has a 50% longer duration, 25% longer range, and leaves behind a mirror image. That's cool. I like that interactivity, which could be good with Phantasmal Image. Shifting Shards. Shifting Power becomes a barrage of 8 Splinters at random enemies within 40 yards during its duration. That could be also really cool. Splintering Orbs. The first 8 times an enemy is damaged by your Arcane Orb, you conjure a Splinter that fires at a damaged target. Arcane Orb damage increased by 10%. The same thing can be said about Frozen Orb. You conjure first 8 times an enemy is damaged by your Frozen Orb, you conjure a Splinter. Volatile Magic. Whenever a Splinter is removed or recalled, it explodes, dealing damage to nearby enemies. Dealing damage reaches beyond 5 targets. Unerring Proficiency for Arcane. Each time you conjure a Splinter, increase your damage to your next Supernova by 18%. Stack it up to 30 times. This could be actually pretty good. While for Frost, it's your Ice Nova by 6%, stacking up to 30 times. The Supernova play for Arcane could be interesting. I haven't seen anyone use this ability outside of PvP in a long while, so that could be actually kind of good. Force of Will. Gain 2% increase critical strike chance and gain 5% increase critical strike damage. So overall, just passive increases. Towards the very bottom, we have our capstone choice, Splinter Storm. Whenever you have 8 or more actively embedded Splinters, you automatically cast Splinter Storm at your target. Splinter Storm will recall all embedded Splinters to you, dealing the remaining periodic damage instantly. After a brief delay, unleash a devastating barrage of Splinters, dealing damage to your target for each Splinter in the Splinter Storm. Splinter Storm will grant you clear casting for Arcane, or Winter's Chill is applied to enemy target as a Frost Mage. I do like the interactivity with Spellslinger and the Splinters. It is more passive than I expected it to be, but these passives are tied into your combat basic abilities and even enhance certain playstyles like Supernova or Ice Nova and picking those up for single target or AoE use. And there's quite a bit of interactivity with your cooldowns, quite a bit of interactivity with your basic combat abilities. There's passive buffs here and there, and even some survivability additions too, like the Look Again talent with Displacement leaving a mirror image. Overall, I'm actually kind of excited for Spellslinger, but I do think this one needs to be tested in game to really see how this one plays. Up next, we got the Shado-Pan Monk, the Brewmaster Windwalker Monk shared hero spec. This is the first time we get to see Windwalker or Monk hero talents or hero specs in general, and we actually have one more to look at after this one. Their main primary ability will be Overwhelming Fury. Dealing damage equal to your maximum health generates a flurry charge. For each 400 energy you spend, unleash all flurry charges as flurry strikes, dealing physical damage per charge. Down the left hand side, we got choice nodes with Pride of Pandaria. Flurry strikes have a 50% additional chance to critical strike, or high impact. Enemies who die within 5 seconds of being damaged by flurry strikes explode, dealing damage to uncontrolled enemies within 8 yards. What does it mean uncontrolled? I guess it's to make sure they're not CC'd or in PvP, but maybe that's a very PvP specific addition here. In the middle, we have Controlled Instincts. Strike at the same target 5 times within 2 seconds grants haste. Multiple instances of this effect may overlap, stacking up to 10 times. One versus many. Damage dealt by Fist of Fury or Keck Smash counts as double towards flurry charge generation. Fist of Fury and Keck Smash damage increased by 10 and 30%. Right hand side, we have Vigilant Watch. Black Eye Kick deals additional 20% critical strike damage and increases the damage of your next set of flurry strikes by 10%. Does this stack? Because that could be really good. Or Efficient Training. Energy spenders deal additional 15% damage. Really? Over 50 energy spent reduces the cooldown of Storm, Earth, and Fire, Serenity, and Weapons of War by 1 second. The capstone ability for this is Wisdom of the Wall. Every 10 flurry strikes become infused with Wisdom of the Wall for 20 seconds. With Wisdom of the Wall, your critical strikes deal additional 30% damage. Your master effect is increased by 25%. Versatility now increases your dodge and crit chance by 25% of its effect. Flare strikes that deal additional shadow damage to all uncontrolled enemies within 6 yards. Another very passive hero spec, but this one plays off of energy, but it also finds ways to reward you having to spend energy. So a very, very steady playstyle that you're going to be able to generate as a Brewmaster or Windwalker. I do feel like this one leans probably more towards Brewmaster just a little because of just how effective Keck Smash can be as an ability and just how often you use it as an energy spender. But we also have another hero spec for Windwalkers and Mistweavers as well, so monks that get into really eat good this time around with the Conduit of the Celestial's ability. Celestial Conduit channel will not break. Oh, so it's a channel. Okay, so Celestial Conduit is an active ability, 1.5 minute cooldown. Your August Celestials empower you, causing you to radiate nature damage onto enemies and healing onto 5 injured allies within 20 yards over 4 seconds, split evenly among them. Healing and damage is increased by 6% per enemy struck up to 30. You may move while channeling, but casting other healing or damaging spells will cancel its effect. So channel will not break to using defensive utility or movement spells. So I wonder if you can press like incapacitate or paralysis on an enemy while channeling Celestial Conduit. Interesting, awkward ability. I think for Windwalker, it's going to be a little bit weird just because I think it may break the flow of the spec a little bit. For Mistweaver, I feel like the channel ability could work okay, but you may move while channeling, so it doesn't actually reduce your movement speed whatsoever. So that could be, you could roll, I imagine, while using this. Inner Compass. You switch between alignments after an August Celestial assists you, increasing corresponding secondary stat. Crane Stance, you get haste. Tiger Stance, you get crit strike. Ox Stance, you gain versatility, and Serpent Stance, you gain mastery. With August Dynasty, casting Jade Stomp increases the damage of your next Rising Sun Kick by 30%, or healing of your next Vivify by 50% as a Mistweaver only. So for Mistweaver, there's a little bit of that damage healing potential, but for Windwalker, it's just damage alone. Further down the hero spec, Courage of the White Tiger. For Mistweaver, Tiger Palm has a 50% chance to cause Zuen to claw your target for physical damage, healing a nearby ally for 200% of the damage done. Chance is increased while invoke Yulon or Jade Serpent or invoke Chi-Ji, the Red Crane is active. For Moonwalker, Tiger Palm has a 50% chance to cause Zuen to claw the target for physical damage, healing a nearby ally, so it does exactly the same thing, but they're just more active whenever your Celestial is active. Strength of the Black Ox. After Zuen assists you, your next Enveloping Mist cast time is reduced by 50% and causes Nuozawa to grant you an Absorb Shield to 5 nearby allies for 5% of your maximum health. Or for Windwalker, after Zuen assists you, your next Black Kick causes Nuozawa to stomp with your target's location, dealing damage to enemies reduced beyond 5 targets. Further down, Chi Swiftness. Your movement speed is increased by 25% chance causing during Celestial Conduit and for 3 seconds after being assisted by a Celestial. Further down, we have Unity Within. Celestial Conduit can be recast during its duration to call upon all of the August Celestials to assist you for 200% effectiveness. Unity Within is automatically cast when Celestial Conduit ends, if not used before expiration. Interesting. So you get to summon your Celestials to assist you, and there's little ways that Celestials can kind of help you out throughout combat. So kind of mix of passive and active abilities. This one does seem a little bit better in my opinion for Mistweaver, just because it has a lot of this offensive power and offensive elements that I think would work for a Fistweaver playstyle in Mythic Plus situations, for instance. For Moonwalker, this does seem good, but I'm kind of almost leaning towards the Shado-Pan hero spec for Moonwalker more than the Celestials at the moment. But this one again, like the Shado-Pan, needs some in-game testing before I can truly wrap my head around this one to really give more of a definitive take, but doesn't seem terrible. Could have potential, but that's my early impression. Alright, up next we have the Farseer, which is the Shaman hero spec between Restoration and Elemental. And I really wanted to see what the Shaman ones look like. I really want to see what Totemic is going to look like. But the Farseer is our very first hero spec for Shamans in general, with Call of the Ancestors as your primary ability. For Elemental, Primordial Wave cast calls an ancestor to your side for 6 seconds. For Restoration, Unleash Life calls an ancestor. Whenever you cast healing or damaging spells, the ancestor will cast a similar spell. Not the same, a similar, so it's almost like you summon a pet that helps you out for a few seconds. When an ancestor expires, they cast Elemental Blast on a nearby enemy. And for Restoration, when they expire, they cast Hydro Bubble at a nearby enemy. Hydro Bubble surrounds the target in a protective water bubble for 10 seconds or an absorb effect. The shield absorbs incoming damage, but the absorbed amount decays fully over its duration, so now you have some shielding to it too. Heed My Call. Ancestor lasts for an additional 2 seconds, or Routine Communication, where Elemental Blast Lava Burst casts have an 8% chance to call an ancestor, or Riptide has a 50% chance to call an ancestor, so either more duration or more chances to proc him. Ancestral Swiftness, an active ability, so your capstone ability is actually an extra effect, 45-second cooldown. Your next healing or damaging spell within 10 seconds is instant, deals 10% increased damage and healing. If you know Nature Swiftness, it is replaced with Ancestral Swiftness and causes Ancestral Swiftness to call an ancestor to your side. Ooh, okay, so this is the way to proc ancestors more regularly. Surprisingly, this is actually a very passive hero spec that simply just calls these ancestors to help you in combat for a handful of seconds. Depending on how strong these ancestors are, that will really determine whether this is a very strong option or kind of mediocre. Being tied to Primordial Wave as well as Unleash Life does mean that it has a bit of a cooldown before you do call ancestors, but if they do enough damage, maybe this could be strong. Surprisingly, it's very passive. Very passive. I expect the Farseer to be something that enhances the Shaman. I didn't expect for it to be a hero spec that calls on adds to help you in combat. Up next we have Hellcaller, which is a hero spec shared between Affliction and Destruction Warlocks, which grants you the ability of Wither, replacing Corruption or Immolate. Wither bestows a vile malediction upon the target, burning the sinew and muscle of its host, dealing Shadow Flame damage over 8 seconds. I love that imagery. On the left hand side, we have talents like Zalian's Ferocity, I'm assuming the Zalium, Shadow damage increased by 5% or fire damage increased by 5%. Mark of Legashi. Curse of Weakness also applies Curse of Tongues, so that could be really good for a utilitarian aspect, or Aura of Enfeeblement. Enemies within 10 yards of the, are affected by the Curse of Weakness and Curse of Tongues within 10 yards of the Warlock at 75% effectiveness. Does that mean that you want to put the Warlock within melee range so you can curse and apply weakness on enemies with Tongues of Weakness? Enemies within 10 yards are affected by your curse. Yeah, enemies within 10 yards. Kind of crazy. Mark of Xavius. Agony's damage is increased by 10%. Agony is now a combo skill. Directly recasting Agony within 2 seconds applies Agony on one other nearby enemy. This could be really good for that cleave capability. Or for Destruction, Wither damage is increased by 10%. Wither is now a combo skill. Direct recasting Wither within 2 seconds applies Wither to one nearby enemy. Also pretty good, honestly. Further down, we have Blackened Soul, which is the primary ability that now alters and changes Wither. Damage and abilities further corrupt enemies affected by your Wither, increasing its stack count by 1. Each time Wither increases, it has a chance to become acute, dealing Shadow Flame damage to its host every 1 second until 1 stack remains. Wither will always become acute after reaching 8 stacks or when the host reaches 20% health. Interesting, so a bit of an execute capability, but also ways to further augment your Wither. Finally, you get a minute cooldown ability called Malevolence. Dark magic erupts from you and corrupts your soul for 20 seconds, causing enemies suffering from your Wither to take Shadow Flame damage and increase its stack count by 3. For affliction, while corrupted, your active withers are acute. Your haste increased by 10%. Malefic Rupture gains 1 additional stack, and wither to targets afflicted by unstable affliction. Interesting. For destruction while corrupted, your active withers are acute. Haste increased by 10, and your Chaos Bolt gains 1 additional stack of wither. Okay, so ways to apply a dot, enhance the dot, and apply the stacks of those dots. So this one is a lot more interactive. It replaces the damage over time ability. It shapes itself depending on affliction or destruction, and allows you to better spread your damage over time abilities, and also play into this buffing up this wither ability as much as possible with multiple stacks. I actually like this one in terms of the design. This one I think is going to be really good for affliction. You need to see and really test it in game to see how this one plays together with destruction specifically. And finally, we have our 12th hero talent, which is the Slayer, a hero spec which is shared between Arms and Fury Warriors, which grants you the ability Slayer's Dominance. Your attacks have a high chance to overwhelm your target's defenses, triggering a Slayer's Strike, dealing low damage and applying Mark for execution, increasing the damage they take from your next execute by 10%, stacking up to 3 times. Overwhelming Blades. Each strike of Bladestorm applies Overwhelmed to all enemies affected, increases damage taken by 1% for 10 seconds. Note, Fury will have access to Bladestorm via specialization talents in the War Within. Okay, interesting. Imminent Demise. Sudden death's chance to reset the cooldown of Execute and make it usable on any target regardless of health is increased. Using sudden death accelerates your next Bladestorm. Striking 1 additional time, maximum to 3. Bladestorm's total duration is unchanged. Slay. Mark for execution increases the critical strike chance and critical strike damage of the next executor target by 5%. Down in the middle, we have ourselves Frantic Flurry. Overpower and Bloodthirst have a chance to cause you to unleash a brief Bladestorm, striking all enemies around you at once. You can now use Pummel and Stormbolt while Bladestorming, which will be really good when it comes to applying a little bit extra control pressure to enemy targets. The capstone choice for the Slayer is going to be Unrelenting Onslaught. When you execute a target that you've marked for execution, reduce the cooldown of Bladestorm by 5 seconds per stack of marked execution, and apply stacks of Overwhelmed equal to the number of stacks of marked execution the target had. That's a lot of stacks upon stacks upon stacks that I've seen so far. Seems like a lot to really comprehend here, but this one obviously plays around passive damage procs that buff the value of the ability of Execute. Makes you want to play a little bit into the Bladestorm, and Bladestorm will be accessible for Fury Warriors as well, so it's kind of cool to see Bladestorm returning. I don't know if you'll actively be using Bladestorm as Fury, because I feel that it's in the past has been a weird ability, whereas Fury you kind of want to constantly be generating and spending your rage, and Bladestorm doesn't really let you do that as efficiently. In fact, you would cancel Bladestorm at times in order to get back to your regular rotation, just to proc Bladestorm to activate other talents and activate other proc abilities. But I wonder if they'll change Bladestorm for Fury, so then it's more than worthwhile to press the ability in terms of the resource generation at the very least. So we'll see how they adjust it. Again, this one also needs a bit more in-game testing. It was a long one, but for now, that's going to be everything we have so far regarding some of the newest hero specs that have been released in this week's update. I want to hear your guys' thoughts down below. What are your thoughts about some of the hero specs, the 12 hero specs that have been released as of today's video? As per usual, if you guys enjoyed this video or found it informative, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I would very much appreciate it. And as always, in the description of every single video and live stream, we have a link to our Discord community channel. Probably the best place to reach out to me directly in case you want to let me know what you thought about this video, or hang out with the rest of the community to discuss some of the upcoming changes. Join our Discord to become part of the community. But otherwise, thank you all so much for watching this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know all of your thoughts down below. And as always, I'll see all of you guys in another video.